I'm going to mute myself.
Hey everyone, and good morning from Seattle, Washington. And we're here for the second Open Source Security Foundation, OpenSSF Town Hall meeting. We'll go ahead and get started. We've got quite a few attendees who have joined us. I'm sure we'll have some, a few more. We've got a few housekeeping things we'll take care of at the start here. To let you know, we will be recording this meeting, and the recording has already started. On to our housekeeping items. I do need to let you know that we will have participants in this meeting who are industry competitors. And because of that, we need to make sure that we conduct our activities here in accordance with antitrust and competition laws. Another note, we are dedicated to providing a harassment-free experience for all participants of our events, this event and all events. And because of that, we are expecting participants to behave in accordance with professional standards. Another housekeeping item, we will be supporting questions and answers during the meeting. So we'll try to, catch those as they make sense as we're doing the presentation. Please go ahead and use from the webinar the Q&A button. So we have an image here that shows you where that's at. And we may be batching up some questions and answering them at the end of sections when presenters speak. We'll try to get through all the questions. We think we have plenty of time for that. So, please put them in, and we're looking forward to having this be an interactive session. For our agenda today, I'll be starting us off with some welcome and updates. We've had some fun momentum in the last 3 months since our first town hall. Then we'll have David Wheeler, and he'll be talking with us about SolarWinds and some lessons learned. SolarWinds has been a huge attack that came up in December since our last town hall meeting, and there are some of our working groups, and certainly at the TAC and the governing board level, we've been having some discussions about how what happened there influences how we think about and prioritize some of our work in OpenSSF. Following that, we'll move on to the technical portion of our session today. So we'll hear from our TAC chair, Technical Advisory Council chair, and then we'll also have updates from each of our 6 working groups. I need to start us off today with a sad note and a happy note. The sad note is that we will be, our current project manager, Lindsay Gendro, will be moving from her role. She's been amazing, so supportive and helpful and always cheerful. And so she'll be moving on from supporting us. She is remaining at the Linux Foundation, where she'll be working on events for our sister project, the Cloud Native Compute Foundation. Thank you, Lindsay, very much, and we will miss you. A note on that, the next event for the Cloud Native Compute Foundation is a security event, and that's Cloud Native Security Day Europe, which is coming up in May. So that might be an event folks from our organization will be interested in attending. So please take a look. To replace is not the right word. I don't think we can totally replace, but our new program manager is Carly Driggers, and Carly is new to the Linux Foundation, but she's doing some great work. She and Lindsay have been overlapping for this month, and she'll be taking over as our primary point of contact beginning the start of March. So thank you, Carly, and welcome. We're so excited to have you. I wanted to let you know that we did get some surveys back, and we're very committed to listening to what you say, what you say, and your thoughts about how we can make these events better. Your thoughts about both what we're doing well and how we can make these events better. And so we did get some survey results from our last town hall, and we heard, comments that the event was well run, and we're doing a good job of transitioning between speakers. And so what we're going to change on that? Nothing. We're going to keep trying to do that the same. We had some comments about making sure we got Zoom link out ahead of the meeting, and we did do that this time. We're also, going to be doing better at making sure we've got notifications disabled so there are no distractions on the screen. The audio quality was occasionally spotty last time. Hopefully that will be better. If you see or hear issues with that, please let us know. Drop a note into the chat. We have switched our platform. We were using the regular Zoom platform, and this time we're on the webinar platform, which is completely web-based and more accessible to people on a wide range of operating systems. And then the other thing we've done this time is shorten our meeting time to 60 minutes. We got through all of our content last time, at a good pace, and so we think we'll be able to hit that and still allow time for questions. We will be having a survey again this time, and we'll have the link to that also at the end of our presentation. So, we encourage you, please do take a moment to tell us how you feel about how we're doing, and we do listen. So now on to some of the fun things about the momentum that we've been having. So we are only 6 months old, And we have gone from, at founding, we had 19 member organizations, and now we have 36, and that's continuing to grow. We have a few more that we'll be announcing in the coming weeks. We have grown from, I think initially we had close to 100, maybe it was 50, 60 individual participants. Last town hall meeting, we had about 150. Now we've got about, going on 300. So we're seeing that increase at a great clip. Since the beginning, we've had 60,000 website visits. And we, at our last event, we announced our Edx course, which is on the fundamentals of developing secure software. And, since that course was introduced, we have grown to nearly 2,400 course registrants. So it's fun to see the interest in that as well. We have many accomplishments also at the technical level. So we've had a number of new projects started. We have some great work going on to define customer personas in some of our areas. We've established our technical vision. I won't go through all of these here. There's a bunch, but we will be, as Ryan discusses the TAC and as working group leads talk through their sections, they'll be diving into some of these and explaining more. We are an open public group and we encourage everyone to get involved. We do have members, but you don't need to be a member to get involved. We have 6 working groups and a couple of other committees. So, anyone can participate in any of those from the, you can learn more about all of those and learn also about finding out when the meetings are and how to join the mailing list, and all of that is available from our openssf.org website from our Get Involved page. And the last thing I'll mention, because this is fun, we do have an OpenSSF store where you can get, swag and such, and things, T-shirts and decals and cute things like our OpenSSF plushie. And that's it for me with an overview and things that have been going on. Now we're going to turn over and have David Wheeler talk with us about SolarWinds and some lessons we've been learning from that.
Okay, go ahead next.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, David.
Sure. All right. So we thought the SolarWinds Orion subversion has been in the news all over, and because of that, we thought it might be useful to go quickly discuss that and at least kind of queue up thinking about lessons learned that we can learn from this. The subversion involving SolarWinds involved a company called SolarWinds, software called Orion. It's not open source software, it's closed source software, but nevertheless, we want to learn from events like this. The fundamental concern that raised a lot of the news was that malicious functionality was introduced by some outside actor in March 2020. It was not detected until December 2020, and it had really devastating impact. The way that SolarWinds Orion is typically deployed in a lot of larger organizations is it has the keys to the kingdom. And so being able to get access and control that led to basically subversion of entire organizations. So, so the question is, what's the underlying cause here? What is particularly interesting and why it made the news was because the attack was fundamentally a subversion of the build environment, which is a much less common kind of attack. As I think almost everybody here knows, software, when you develop it, you modify source code, but before you can actually run it, you run it through typically some sort of packaging system, compilers, minifiers, that sort of thing. And the attackers subverted that process, the build process. In particular, the there was a particular malware program that's now called Sunspot. It's a little process that ran on the build environment, and it watched if something called msbuild.exe was run. If it was, it checked if Orion was being compiled, and if so, it quietly modified the source code being compiled at build time to insert the actual attack that is now called Sunburst. Sunburst then delayed, typically about 2 weeks, and then it phoned home. And then the attackers would sometimes have it deploy an actual attack that's often called Teardrop. And what's interesting here is that this meant it was extremely stealthy. Reviewing things like the source code or watching it install and run for a day or two didn't help. There were other attacks around the same time that added to the confusion. There was actually an unintentional vulnerability that was being exploited by a different attack that was actually inserting changes into the system after it had been deployed. That, frankly, is a much more common kind of attack. And there's some other attack called Raindrop. I'm not going to talk about that in part because there still seem to be uncertainties about it. It's important to note this is not the only time that the source code is different than the packaged executable. Okay, people have had various kinds of attacks that do this kind of thing. NPM's module ESLint scope involved an NPM account that was subverted, and so in that case, the package that was sent out was not the same, did not match the source code in GitHub. Same happened with NPM module event stream, where it had a new owner who added new malware that again was not in the source code that was exposed to the public. There's also a Chrome extension called the Great Suspender, where again there was a new owner, added spyware that was not visible in the source code that was available to the public. The interesting thing to note about these kinds of things where the build system is subverted or there's something where the source code's different is that a lot of these source security measures don't work against this kind of thing. So things like, hey, we're going to have lots of people review the source code. That doesn't help when the problem is after the source code is developed, something happened to produce the final program that everyone's using. Similarly, digital signing doesn't help because this really was the generated program that was being distributed. It just had a subversion along the way. Next slide. So in short, we need to learn from build time subversion attacks. In the short term, harden our build environments from attacks, campaign to enable developer 2FA, really multi-factor authentication for anybody who has control of these systems. In the longer term, the only technique I'm aware of that can really detect these kinds of problems is verified reproducible builds. This is where you can regenerate for bit from the source code and verify that it actually works. It's also important to note that we still need to counter other attacks because attackers will try the easiest approaches first. So we still need to make it easier to use tools and interfaces securely. We still need to educate our developers. We still need to use analysis tools and digital signing and so on. All right, and lots of references down if any of you are curious and learning more. So I'm hoping that little bit of context in the news, we all should be learning from attacks like this as we proceed in our work in OpenSSF. So thank you. Okay, I'm done.
Sorry about that. My keyboard is being strange and not letting me advance the slides. Here we go. Sorry. Okay, Ryan.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Ryan Haining, and I'm the chair for the Technical Advisory Council. And we've been busy the past few months. What we work on primarily is we're the oversight for various technical initiatives within the OpenSSF, which essentially means that we make sure that everybody's coordinated and working towards kind of common goals, and we don't have duplication of efforts and that sort of thing. So we approve and facilitate that collaboration through the technical initiatives, otherwise known as working groups. And then we assist with identifying funding and resourcing requirements with the governing board. So for those that aren't familiar, all of the funding and budgeting goes through the governing board, but the TAC can kind of help you guys navigate that, and we'll coordinate with them. We do have a representative from the TAC that sits on the governing board. So if you have questions about how that works or your working group is in need of funding, we can help facilitate that. Next slide. So one of the things that we've been working on and recently published is the technical vision for the OpenSSF. So I'm not going to word by word read this to you guys, but the highlights are, that we envision a future where participants in the open source ecosystem use and share high quality software with security handled proactively and by default as a matter of course. This leads to four things such as guidance developers can learn. They have educational guides and tooling at their disposal, automation via tooling and continuous assurance work. We'll develop reports that developers and researchers and people with a vested interest in open source projects can read about and identify known security issues within a project. And then additionally, most importantly, resolve, right? Community members can provide information and notifications about defects and work towards actually resolving those and provide solutions to that. So within that context, the OpenSSF is around to provide tooling and services, training, infrastructure, and resources to achieve that vision. So that's the end goal for all of what our working groups are coordinated on. Next slide. So in addition to the vision, we've also been developing a list of potential future work that's not currently covered by working groups. So for example, as we all know, there's a ton of things that we could go tackle within the open source security ecosystem, and we're not going to get to it all this year or even next year, right? So we're been putting together sort of a giant backlog. It's a huge document right now, but eventually that'll turn into GitHub issues that we can kind of pull off, and those can serve as inspiration for future working groups. So if folks want to look through that, they can see some of that information and decide if they want to contribute and maybe even spin up a new technical initiative for it. So from that work is where we developed the vision along with some other material. And then we've been formalizing the tax structure and the election process. So since August, we've been bootstrapped. And so kind of been iterating on the process there and making sure that we have a final procedure in place so that by the end of the year, we can formalize what those elections look like and how people get nominated. So we'll have that published shortly. And then additionally, we formalized the life cycle of the technical initiatives, from incubating to active and if we retire one, what all that looks like. And so all of that information currently you can find on the GitHub repos. And then sort of our next thing that we'll be doing is reviewing the charters of the existing working groups. So that's just more of a formalization process. I don't anticipate there should be too much controversy or changes affected there, but we do want to make sure that every working group going forward does have a public charter, that it's documented. Participants are able to easily find out what license is being used, that sort of thing. So we'll be going through that shortly as well. Next slide. So ways that you can get involved, our meetings are open to everyone. So even though the TAC has, official representatives, we have tons of participants that are not quote official, but we definitely value all of that input. So every other Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific time. Our next meeting will be on November 17th. That is definitely not accurate. We haven't updated that. So it's actually tomorrow. So February 23rd. So we post everything online, and we have the Slack channels, and it's posted to YouTube. So feel free to join in on those meetings and get involved with us.
All right. Good morning, everybody, from the rainy Pacific Northwest. My name is Mike Scaveda. I lead the Identifying Security Threats Working Group. The mission of our working group is to enable stakeholders, meaning developers, users, upstream developers, compliance teams, whoever, to have an informed confidence in the security of the open source projects that they use. Next slide. Yep. Okay. So we've really done we kind of have two big projects in motion at the moment. First one is a metric dashboard. We've been talking about this since the formation of OpenSSF. I think I presented this in November as well. The purpose of this is to collect, curate, and communicate metrics for open source projects. This lets the consumer of this metric dashboard understand at a glance what the security posture is of specific open source components, and given a set of open source components from, let's say, a bill of materials or just a big list that you have, which of those carry the most security risk? So we've had a few starts and stops since we started. Right now we have a proof of concept dashboard leveraging Grafana that is using data collected by other OpenSSF projects, including the scorecard project and the best practices badge database. We also collect a little bit of data from GitHub as well. It's mostly proof of concept, but the intent of the project right now is to show what's possible and to have something to argue about in terms of what is the right metric here and is what's the best way to convey the most useful information. So this project is on GitHub. And if you go to the next slide, you can see a screenshot of it. This is the default Grafana backend. The data on the bottom left is basically all the things on the bottom are check marks for pass and X's for fail. And bottom left is as the title suggests, is the OpenSSF best practices. On the bottom right is the scorecard metrics. This is for the Kubernetes project. This is our current proof of concept UI. We are looking to make significant progress on this. We are looking for help in terms of folks that can kind of roll up their sleeves and put together dashboards and actually create the thing. We also are always looking for more ideas on what the right metrics are. Next slide. The second project that we've done is called Security Reviews Project. The point here is to create a community collection of security reviews done by a human in some way against open source projects. This is not a vulnerability disclosure mechanism. This is not an alternative to CVEs or anything like that. But it provides one thing which I think is unique, which is a positive indicator of the security quality of a component. The negative indicators you can find in vulnerability reports. We think there's value there too. But most importantly, if you're using a component foo and it doesn't have any vulnerabilities, how would you differentiate between no known vulnerabilities and no vulnerabilities? And the idea is that if someone looks at it and they say, nope, this thing looks good, that's a positive indicator. It usually gets lost within organizations that do this work. It usually doesn't get shared. We want to collect that and share that. So you'll have some information that, as to the security quality of a thing. So here's my ask. If you or your organization do these things as a matter of course, please consider donating them to this project. It helps the world out. So we have a little bit of progress. This project launched about a week and a half ago. Thanks to the Open Source Technology Improvement Fund for donating a review for the Linux kernel response process. We included an external review done against zlib. Thank you to Dylan Bala for contributing a few reviews of a few NPM packages. And we've contributed a few hundred vulnerable packages to the dependency confusion attacks and giving a little bit more information on how those things work. So this is an open project, OSSF security reviews. Next slide. This is just the repo. That's not very interesting. Go next slide. So if you want to get involved more, consider a security review, join our Slack channel, come to the next work group meeting. Our next meeting is, I think, next Wednesday. The link to the working group page is there, or contact me. We're also on the OpenSSF community calendar. That's it. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Michael. Next up, security tooling.
Hi, this is Ryan Ware. I want to talk about security tooling. Go ahead and move on to the next slide. I want to say thank you to Simon Bennett. Simon has been this work group lead up until now, and he's done a great job. He's planning on continuing to participate, but you know, he will be irreplaceable as a lead. Hopefully I can fill his shoes, and want to thank him for all the work he's done. So the mission of this particular working group is to identify and build universally acceptable developer-focused tooling to help the open source community secure their code. There's a wide variety of implications from that. One of the things that I want to make sure people understand, though, is we can't just create tools. You know, we can't simply just create tools and throw security tools at developers. We need to make sure that the developers find the tools easy to use and to easily understand what those tools are telling them. So, I mean, if developers have lots of work that they have to do to go integrate these tools into their development processes, they generally won't be doing much to incorporate them. And so one of the things that we'll be looking at in the coming weeks is how do we help developers integrate these tools? What are the BKMs? How do we help them move along so they understand when they get a pull request, they can understand the security implications of what they're taking in. Next slide. So the working groups had a number of accomplishments. There's the OWASP ZAP, which is now freely available on GitHub Actions Marketplace. The ZAP baseline scan and the ZAP full scan are available. If you want to know more, definitely ask Simon Bennett. ZAP is his baby. He'll be happy to talk your ear off about it. There's also the CVE benchmark dataset in tooling that was presented at Black Hat EU. The dataset itself is handcrafted metadata for over 200 JavaScript CVEs, including fix commits. Tooling to benchmark security tools, does it detect the vulnerability and does it recognize the patch? Those are things that they're looking at in this. And if you want to know more, there's a long discussion currently going on in tech issue number 53. There's a link here. Please feel free to jump in and share your thoughts. Also, Bass is very tied into this, and please feel free to reach out to Bass directly. There's also a link to the OpenSSF CVE benchmarking project here. If you would like to get involved, we definitely need lots of help. There's still lots of work to do with CVE benchmark. Help us make it the best benchmark. Hook up and benchmark your own security tools with the benchmark, and we need to add much more CVE metadata into what we have. The security tools collateral and best practices, we need it to be able to share information on what tools are available, documentation on how to easily incorporate those tools, and how tools can best fit into developer workflows. We also want to know more about tools that your organizations have been using and may have created and want to open source, and how they can help the communities out there. Finally, if you want to join in, there's working group meetings every 2 weeks, GitHub discussions, we have a Slack channel and a mail list, of course.
Okay. Thank you, Ryan, so much for sharing what's up in the security tooling working group. Next up is our best practices working group, and Krob is going to lead us on a discussion there.
Hello from beautiful snow-kissed Columbus, Ohio. I am Krob. I have the great pleasure of being the working group lead for the Developer Best Practices group. As you can see from our awesome mission statement, our goal is to help provide open source developers with best practices, recommendations, and then give them an easy way to learn and apply these recommendations. Next slide, please. We're all about developers, like my friend with the awesome hair there has to say. Next slide. We've organized ourselves in kind of 3 core themes. We're looking at trying to identify good practices and tools that open source developers can use and integrate into their security work. Nextly, we're looking to provide education and promote learning of these activities, these good secure coding techniques, and kind of highlight mistakes we want people to avoid. And then lastly, we're looking at how to encourage people to adopt these good practices and tools in their community or their particular projects. Next slide. Just to give you an overview as a high-level reference architecture of how the group is organized, we have 5 core projects currently. At the top, we have CRE, which is an OWASP project. And the goal of that project is to help identify requirements across different regulatory and legal specifications. Pretty awesome work. We kind of see that as the head end feeding a lot of the other good practices that filter down. In the middle, we have our hub, the SKF, which is our secure knowledge framework. This is a tool that helps developers identify security issues in their projects or kind of help them go through labs and testing. Now, related to that, well, once you've identified some good practices and you've had a little bit of time to learn and test out your knowledge, we have the Edx course that was earlier mentioned. And this course is one of our tools to help teach developers the fundamentals of secure software coding. Alongside that, we have the CII Best Practices Badges project, which was just recently mentioned. And with the Best Practices project, we're looking to identify these best practices and kind of help highlight who's implementing them and provide this badging system that connects out to other projects. And then lastly, we've added on the scorecards project, which helps people understand how to adopt. Ideally, this is it's an automated tool. It runs and helps you make good trust decisions and kind of evaluate the posture of the security of the project you're thinking about incorporating. Next slide, please. Just a particular slide all about the Edx course. There are 3 classes. We have just kind of a general kind of security 101 course, and then we get into courses that talk about how to implement some of these techniques and then how to verify them, and you get into some more higher level classes. We're very excited about the Edx course uptake. Next slide, please. So overall, we've been working to help craft a set of user personas to help us identify problems that exist within open source software development. And this is something that's shared with a couple different other working groups. But ideally, once we start talking the same language, we're talking about an open source maintainer or a security researcher or finder that helps us kind of zero in on what those pain points are, and we can start to make more corrective actions. How do we make those interactions smoother? Kind of looking at the project as a whole, David put in some great information about the number of Edx classes that people have signed up for. I'm really excited, and I would strongly encourage anyone that either is a developer or works with developers, check this out, free coursework. And if you're interested, they even offer a small, for a small fee, a certification. So you can say, I'm a certified open sourceologist. We also have the CII Best Practices badge. That we just went through a major back-end update on that. With SKF, we've looking on integrating a tool called CodeQL into a lot of work with Zav and the SKF guys. The CRE team has been working on getting data into an ASVS format, and they have NIST 853 done. And they're looking to see how to make that maintenance easier. And the scorecard project's working with the Envoy project to help evaluate dependencies. Next slide. So a lot of different ways to get involved. We meet weekly Mondays at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard. That is available on the OpenSSF calendar. We have a Slack channel, we have a mailing list, and really, if you are interested in open source development, we really think this is the place for you to come and add a lot of value across the whole ecosystem. That is my time on one of my favorite working groups, the Best Practices Group. Next slide, please. Hey, everybody, it's Probe. I'm the new working group lead for the Vulnerability Disclosures Group, which I think is one of my favorite working groups to be in. Next slide, please. The Vulnerability Disclosures Group is we're looking to improve overall security of open source software ecosystem by helping develop and advocate well-managed vulnerability reporting and communication. Next slide. So basically, we're looking to try to help make the discovery and fixing of security issues much simpler. A couple of things we're working on. We were working on those aforementioned personas. We have a very detailed set of pain points between these different persona groups. Our newest project is a vulnerability disclosure white paper we're working on to help document good practice. And that's the guidance around vulnerability management. Next slide, please. From a persona perspective, this basically the persona helps you understand the problems in a process from a certain perspective, a documented perspective of an individual group or constituency, like maintainers, finders, suppliers, consumers, and coordinators. Each one of these groups has different goals and motivations, and they have different methodologies of potentially how they interact. So it's important to kind of take that into perspective as you're looking at a problem as complex as coordinating vulnerability disclosure information. Next slide, please. This is a real high level workflow, very overly simplified, but taking those personas, we can apply it to this workflow to see which element, which personas are relevant to each step in the process. And then we can dive in and look to see how do we make these different stages easier? How do we reduce friction, provide documentation or good practice? Next slide, please. Our next project, as I mentioned, is a white paper, and this is where we're going to try to capture all this really good practice. So this vulnerability disclosure is widely documented in the industry, not so much in open source. So we're trying to coalesce all these really good practices, whether it's a very standard, dodgy standard like ISO, or something like a little more agile, like the GPZ team just released a new guide. So we're looking at creating this. If anyone's interested in participating, I'm writing the PR right now. We would love your help on crafting this good practice. Next slide. Just like every other group, great ways to get involved. We meet every 2 weeks on Monday at 8 a.m. Pacific. And we have the same, we have a Slack channel, we have an email list. Our videos are generally recorded when I remember to hit the button. And if you're interested in helping improve vulnerability disclosure between open source maintainers, security researchers, suppliers, coordinators, any of those different personas, please consider joining us and sharing your knowledge. That's it. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Grobe. Amazing hat, and I guess we're gonna have to find out from you where you got that and see if we can get it added to our store at our OpenSSF website. Very fun. I also just want to give a quick plug for the Edx community course. I actually sat down and took the course, all 3 of the courses over the holidays. Didn't take very long, great information. And I'm now a certified secure development fundamentals customer, I guess. Anyway, I'm certified. Okay,
Honk,
so
rather.
honk honk. Okay, so let's talk about digital identity attestation, and we'll have David Wheeler take over again.
Thank you very much. Sad, I cannot compete with Grobe's hat, but I do have the OpenSSF plushie, which I will put here in pride of place. So unfortunately, Dan Lawrence and Kim Lewandowski aren't able to be here right now, so I'm going to do my best to fill in for them. So I'm going to talk first about digital identity attestation. And the fundamental problem that this particular working group is trying to deal with is that on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. Now, perhaps we don't care if you're a dog, but we'd like to know, wait a minute, you say you're that person who contributed the last time. Are you really? I don't know. How can I confirm that? And so moving on to the objective. The objective of this working group is to enable open source maintainers, contributors, and end users to understand and make decisions on the provenance of the code that they maintain, produce, use. Next. One challenge is that a lot of people have been nibbling at this space from very, very different angles. And so instead of just trying to leap out without really understanding the different things that have gone on, the group right now has been kind of in an information gathering mode. Where we've had a lot of people bring in presentations, and we've been trying to develop a threat model in part based on what we learn over time. So if you follow that link in the presentation, which I believe will be out later, you can see some of the threat model information. And the links there point off to different presentations we've had about the Linux kernel. Linux kernel, the LF actually funds various work to help the Linux kernel developers manage identity. There's, of course, in Toto and Tough. There's some self-sovereign identity work that's gone on, various organizations, including Hyperledger. Node.js has its own release process, which they are, of course, concerned about identity. We've had several presentations about integrating get signing with SSH. There's been quite a bit of work, which we think is on, I personally think is on the road to something very positive, but there's work to be done on this. And also PKI Jensen, you can follow the links and see more. So um, uh, I think it was both Kim and Dan, and I think maybe some others, I can go back, had a nice blog post that kind of did a roundup summary of the various presentations as we try to get a handle of what's going on in this space. Next. So if you're interested in getting involved, please do so. We meet every 2 weeks. The next meeting is March 3rd. That's Wednesdays. We meet every other Wednesday from noon to 1 Eastern time, just for whatever your time zone is. You can, of course, see the invite on the OpenSSF calendar. Is true for all the OpenSSF events. Got a repo. There's a public mailing list, various notes, and so on. I think that's my last slide. Okay. And let me move on. Securing critical projects. Unfortunately, Kim also isn't able to be here, so I'm going to fill in for her next. All right. The problem that this particular working group, I think, frankly, this this cartoon, I think explains a lot of the, this is a well-known XKZ cartoon, and like many cartoons, it does a spectacular job of explaining simply a real problem. We have lots of complex digital infrastructure that we depend on, and yet it often ends up depending on some very, very shaky, not necessarily well supported components in there. Next. And so our mission is to improve the security of the most critical open source projects. Next. Now, I'm only going to be talking about what we've been doing since the last town hall meeting. The last town hall meeting, we noted that, in fact, Linux Foundation and Harvard has actually been funding Harvard to do quite a bit of this work, and of course, they're very much participating in this working group and so on. But some of the other things that have gone on more in this working group since the last town hall meeting. There's a small project called Criticality Score, which attempts to create a simple criticality score for an open source project based solely on quantitative data you can gather rapidly. Codes on GitHub, you can see what that looks like. Another package called Package Feeds, and what Package Feeds does, it basically monitors the repos for certain language level package managers, and tries to gather some basic data about them, and oh, look what's happened more recently. You can then take that data and analyze it. For example, there's another project called Package Analysis, which analyzes open source packages for malicious software. Basically it takes the package feeds data, say, hey, there's something new here, and then Package Analysis tries to analyze it. Now, I do want to warn you, any tool that tries to detect malicious software, there's no guarantee you're going to find it. In fact, a really good adversary is going to be good at evading these kinds of things. But not all adversaries are very capable. So what I would say is right now it's focused more on the pikers, the amateurs. But you know what? We don't want to be. We want to detect the attacks from the amateurs. So while this is, I just want to characterize this because this is not solving the problem completely, but it is helping reduce the risks, which is in many cases all you can do. And it certainly is as a help. We've had a number of presentations from different folks, the ISRG, DIFN, which does some malware detection, and we've also had a presentation by Chris Lamb on reproducible builds. The idea behind reproducible builds, as I mentioned earlier with SolarWinds, is being able to check on build system security or build environment security by enabling the verification of a build, being able to rebuild some software and verify that it produces the same bits as you already have. And that way it's much, much likely that the build system, build process, build environment were subverted. I think that's my last slide. Is there a next slide? Oh, okay. Get involved. There we go. There is one more slide. Okay, so please get involved. Excellent. We're on Slack. We're on email. We've got a GitHub repo. Next meeting is Thursday, February 25 from noon to 1 Eastern time. We would love to see you there. Just go to the GitHub page and you can find all the meeting details and so on from there. So with that, thank you. Thank you very much. And I think we have time for Q&A.
Yeah, we do have time for Q&A. So we've been answering some questions as they've been coming along in the Q&A section. We've been able to answer, I think, all of those so far offline. And I don't know, Lindsay, is it possible to, do we want to open up and, let people have verbal questions if there are any for a few minutes?
We can do that. If you do have a question that you would like to ask, you can use the raise hand function, and I can take you off of the mute portion of the webinar. So if you have a question, you can use the raise hand, and you can also still use the Q&A feature if you feel more comfortable with that.
Great, thanks, Lindsay. Yeah, so we're happy to take questions about, anything about the OpenSSF, where we're going, what you can expect in the future, any other technical questions, things that we're currently including in our charter, things that we might include in charters for various groups, anything along those lines.
We do have a question in the Q&A. Which working group is most receptive to a verifiable build project?
Oh, that's a great question. So
I can jump in a little bit, and Kay, you can tell me I'm all washed up.
Let's see what you say. Go ahead.
Fair enough. Okay. I think there's at least two working groups in particular that have already discussed this. The Critical Projects Working Group, in fact, has already had a presentation specifically on verifiable builds, because if some software is especially critical, one of the things that can be done to harden it up is to enable verifiable builds. Now, I think there has been some brief conversation, though I'm not sure how much, about talking about it as a best practices, which would also bring it into the best practice working group. There's nothing that says that different working groups can't work on different parts. The working groups, more than occasionally a working group works on one piece, another on another. For example, the metrics, the security threats group gathers in metrics that have been developed from tools from other working groups, and that's perfectly fine. So I don't think it has to be an either or. And Kay, now you can tell me I'm all wrong, and here's the correct answer.
Well, I'm not saying you're wrong. What I'll say is that there's another option. So, and the other option is we can start a new working group looking at verifiable builds. So there's nothing that says we, have to stop at 6 working groups. If we feel like there's, enough to do there that it justifies another group. Why, certainly, if someone wants to make that proposal, we should bring it up to the TAC. We have the TAC process of creating new working groups, and so we can we can look at that. We're very interested in it. That's what you should hear from this. We think there's there's a component of verifiable builds that we'll need to address for our open source projects.
Another question I'd like to ask or elevate here.
Okay.
What is the best way to get involved in a project that you're interested in? How can someone get involved? What's the best route?
Maybe we should have Ryan. Do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, definitely. So I was actually, to comment on the previous question too, I was going to second your your option as far as having its own dedicated working group for reproducible builds. I can definitely see that being a large enterprise that might have the need for its own group. But as far as getting involved, all of the meeting invites are published online, so you can go to our shared OpenSSF calendar that's accessible from the GitHub/OSSF org as well, and just join the meetings to start. That's definitely the first place, kind of see where the group's at and what they're doing, where they need help. If there's code, enlist in the repos, but definitely start with the meetings and then join in on Slack and have conversations. Everybody is very, very receptive to newcomers, so please jump in, get involved. We're more than happy to help.
Anything else? I thought I maybe saw one more in the chat. Maybe that's been answered.
Yep, everything in the chat has been answered. And we've got one person with a raised hand. Hold on one second while I unmute you, Paul. All right, go ahead, Paul. All right, Paul, you just have to, there you go.
Sorry. So I'm interested in trying to integrate communities between civilian and military. I'm currently a military cybersecurity professional, and one of the projects that we're pushing is DoD level open source projects. Now, my question is, how would I enable you guys to come and invite and talk about the awesome stuff that you're doing right now? What is the best communication route?
Oh, great question. So we do have an outreach committee, and there is in our GitHub in our GitHub site, you'll see if you kind of scroll down through the various projects and committees, there's one that's called Outreach. Jennifer Furnick is leading that. I'm not sure if, I don't think she might not be able to jump in here, but if you go look for that and then reach out from there to Jennifer. There are a couple of others that are involved, and we can definitely do that. We're very interested in getting the word out about OpenSSF, so we'll round up some folks to work with you to set up a presentation. Thanks for asking. Yeah.
Covered in terms of the legalities and any bureaucratic stuff that I have to take care of from my end, so that I could go through your outreach process, so I could have you guys speak in the bundle of developers that I have from our perspective, and make sure that they're aware that your foundation is existing to support open source. And that's what we're pushing moving forward. And I would love to work with you guys moving forward.
That'd be great. I don't know of any legalities in it. David?
Yeah, I actually, in my former life, I presume you mean the U.S. military, since you said DoD. I actually helped write the DoD policy in open source software, and so I'd be happy to chat with you offline.
I would love to connect, sir. Definitely.
Great. Okay, we have just a couple more minutes, so if there's another one or two questions, we can take those. If not, that's okay. We can also wrap up. I've got a couple of the quick wrap up slides. Okay, great. We'll go ahead and wrap up then. So thank you all for being here, for participating, for your questions. It's really an honor for all of us working in OpenSSF to be here and to be working with each other, and just to feel the enthusiasm and know that the work that we're doing is important. It's important it's important the world over. It's important for every company, for every country, and we're all here to gain momentum, pool our resources, and make things happen. So if folks here want to get involved or know anyone else who might want to get involved, we've mentioned a couple of times the Get Involved page on openssf.org. From that page, you can find links to our working groups, to our GitHub site, how to join mailing lists, to our calendar. we've also got links to our Twitter tweet and also for blog posts that we've written and our Slack channel. So it's all there. Take a look at that site. And as I mentioned earlier, we would love to have you fill out a survey. Tell us what we're doing well and what things you'd like to see different when we do our next town hall. We will be doing these every 3 months. We're on a 3-month cadence, and that'll be our opportunity to share with you the progress that we're making and hear back from you with any questions. So that's what I have. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure, and we'll see you all again in April, and hopefully before in our working groups and our meetings. Thanks.
All right, everyone, I'm going to go ahead and close the webinar. Thank you all.